So now joined by Tom Steyer, who is founder and president of NextGen Climate. Wonderful to have you in front of me this afternoon. And you are someone who campaigns strongly against the current commander-in-chief. When you look at the current occurrences, the people that are being moved into the administration, are you as negative and pessimistic as you were on the day he was voted in?
Well, I think that we were expecting that he would nominate completely unfit and radical people who would try and roll back American interests and oppose what we think of as the American way of life, and he has lived down to our expectations. Wow. So we are not surprised, but we were fervently opposed to this administration being voted in for all the reasons that we see on display every single day.
Are you looking to, therefore, react to this? How does one, you put $87 million into the election itself, how do you now call for action to move forward in some of your views?
Well, what we did in 2016 was we tried to enable as broad-based a democracy as possible. So that meant registering people, working with community groups to engage people on the issues, and trying to get the broadest possible participation by American citizens. That's exactly what we believe in, that when American citizens are informed and engaged, they're essentially moral, they're very intelligent, and we get good outcomes. So that's exactly what we're trying to do now, is to make sure that we keep working in the communities with community groups, and also to go online so that Americans are aware of what's going on, are engaged, and can take action, the kinds of things like calling their representatives, going to town hall meetings, the substance of democracy, the civic engagement that takes place between election days, that is the absolute crucible of American democracy.
We're seeing that people power to such great extent. I mean, across the world, there haven't just been protests and walks and marches here in San Francisco and Washington, but even in London. This is global. But why didn't it work during the electoral process, during the campaign? Why didn't people go out and vote who you were trying to incentivize to?
Well, I think one of the things that happened in 2016 was that people took the Obama administration for granted. They thought this is just a normal administration doing kind of a mediocre, average job. What they didn't realize was what a good job they were really doing. That actually that kind of performance, whether it was pulling together the whole international climate conference, whether it was dealing with Ebola masterfully, whether it was the oil spill in the Gulf, whether it was coming back from the gigantic 2008 financial crisis, they performed, incredibly well. And people assumed that that was the average. So they felt like, well, it's not that important that I show up. Yes, I don't agree with the Republicans, but I don't necessarily, it's not that much of a risk because that's kind of an average performance. I think what we're seeing right now is the contrast between what happens when we get a Republican administration with Republican support in both houses of Congress, as opposed to the kind of consistent, professional, moral leadership that we got from the Obama administration.
Well, what you hope to see in a democracy is loyal and rigorous opposition. Is the opposition living up to this moment when we have an administration that is causing mass protests? Are the Democrats able to hold the Republicans to account at the moment?
Well, if you look at the way that Congress is configured, they have very few levers to pull. But if you look at the power of the American people and their ability to coalesce with the technology that's available today, the American people have an ability to respond real time that is unparalleled in our history. And I believe that that will is the strongest power in the United States of America, is the greatest force for good in the world.
Can I dare go into the money behind this then? Because you said there would be no limit to what you would spend to work against Donald Trump. How are you putting your money to work? You say it's to get people out there engaged. What does that mean in reality? What do you fund?
Well, let me give you an example of what we did in 2016. I mean, in 2016, with partners, we registered over 800,000 people in California. We registered over 1 million people around the United States. We were on 370 college campuses, organizing students to talk to each other about the issues, And with partners, we knocked on over 11 million doors. So we were doing the basic work of trying to engage Americans in longer conversations, person to person, so they could think about the issues and come to their own conclusions. That's what we believe in, a broad democracy of Americans being engaged and thinking about the issues. And that is very, very possible in between election days, because the ability to communicate is so great, and then the ability to take combined action is so great.
So are you still in the colleges? Are you still going and knocking on people's doors right here, right now?
Absolutely. I mean, from our standpoint, if you look and see what has been the reaction to the voice of the American people when the Republican Congress's first move is to get rid of the ethical oversight, American outrage in terms of calling in and making their voice heard made that get pulled right away. When Mr. Trump said he was going to put a 20% tariff on goods coming in from Mexico, the outrage from American citizens made sure that didn't happen. The fact of the matter is what we're seeing is a pushback from people who had been disengaged from politics, who felt that it wasn't relevant for their lives, who thought this society just works, I don't need to participate, are now realizing, oh my goodness, democracy is not a spectator sport, it's a participation sport.
We heard from the president today that an executive order, a new executive order, will come in to enhance the travel ban in whatever way that means. The protests don't seem to have worked in that respect. What worries you the most about the current administration?
This administration is unfit to serve in so many ways, on so many levels. I mean, you start with the fact that they are waging a broad-based attack on the civil liberties of Americans, whether that's a free press. I think that's something you should be worried about. Whether they're suppressing the vote, trying to take away the vote from American citizens, whether they're trying to go after freedom of religion. There is a broad-based attack on what we would think of as the civil liberties that Americans have fought for literally hundreds of years, and that they're trying to roll back. So that is something that any American should be outraged about, and that as a patriotic duty should be participating in the fight to protect those values and those rights that have literally been won over hundreds of years, right up to marriage equality. So that is something where we feel very strongly that the people who are activists, the people who do engage, are the patriots. And attacking basic American rights, from my standpoint, is among the most disloyal, un-American, unpatriotic things I can imagine.
Are the media, as much as they can, and are the conduits of the media those that help bring some of the headlines and the stories to the general public, Facebook, Google, whichever media you want to consume it by, are they doing enough of a role at the moment to ensure that fake news is no longer?
Well, I actually find it amusing to watch the media realize how they got played in the election. I think that you see very long-term, highly respected media outlets behaving entirely differently in February of 2017 than they did in October, September, August of 2016. And I think one of the things that I feel the most strong about, and which I think you're seeing a change in, is what I call false equivalence. So there's a question of the Republicans were outraged about the idea of Hillary Clinton's emails. Outraged, and they were strong, and at the same time, they were playing footsie with the Russians. We absolutely know this, while the Russians were hacking our election. Now, what was it in Hillary Clinton's emails, again, that was so bad? And yet, from the standpoint, if you looked in to see the coverage up to November 8, 2016 between those two, they weren't even equivalent. It was like one of them was this huge story, and one of them was buried.
I must ask you, as a fervent climate campaigner, there is someone who talks your language very close to the Trump administration right now. Elon Musk from California is going over and meeting in Trump Towers. Is that a good thing? Is he the right voice to have next to the president at the moment?
I think that's a huge mistake for Elon Musk. I think the fact of the matter is, what he's trying to do is to bring to bear objective facts and careful reasoning and great thought, and a number of people have tried to do this. You know, people who I really respect have tried to do this. Al Gore tried to do this. Mitt Romney tried to do this. I think when you're dealing in a conversation with someone, the question is you have to ask, can they hear that? There, you know, at the day after, or maybe even the same day that Al Gore talked to Trump about climate, he nominated Pruitt for the EPA. So the fact of the matter is, you have to ask yourself, do you have a trustworthy counterparty? Is this someone who can hear objective truth, hear closely thought out analysis, and make a rational decision? And everything that we're seeing about this is no. This is an administration that doesn't believe in truth. You know, if you look and see, the scientists are going to march next month. Did you know that? There's a scientist march for truth. That they have to go out and say, this is a society that's based on research and analysis and observable fact. And we can't just throw that out the window. That is, we are 600 years into that point. That was the basis for moving out of the dark ages, was that we're now going to believe, we're now going to study things and analyze them, not just come up with our beliefs. So the fact of the matter is, when I think about going and talking to this administration and presenting thoughtful evidence, I see no indication that that makes any sense.
What does that still, when back in November you said, after the Trump win, I may not run for governor, where do you stand in that?
Well, what I said when they asked me that was, they said, does this change the analysis of where the United States is? And I said, of course it does. We have just seen a radical turn in the course of the United States for at least the next few years. And so anything that you think about, whatever the, you know, whether it's civil liberties, the rights of immigrants, whether you're talking about the rights of people to organize in the workplace and the rights of working people, whether you're thinking about healthcare or whether you're thinking about climate. Whatever you thought before is different now. And the question is, how are you going to respond to that in the strongest way you can? And what I was saying to those people was, whatever I was thinking, wasn't actually answering their question, but what I was saying was, whatever I was thinking about before, I have to put in a new context.
But you will run then?
No, what I'm saying is this, from my standpoint, the ability to put together grassroots organization, to work with grassroots organizations, just the way we did in 2016, to work on campuses, and to develop a voice back and forth so that people can be informed and figure out what to do and give suggestions and have those suggested acts on, is something I'm totally committed to. So whatever I do from a personal standpoint has got to be something that makes that effort stronger and amplifies the impact.
And could that be made stronger via a role of as governor?
I haven't decided.
Well, we hope when you decide, you come back and you share with us. One last question, the economy. Do you feel it remains on such strong foot as it is at the moment? We have seen share prices at record for Goldman Sachs, for Apple, close for Amazon. Does that continue?
So let me say this. I've spent a long time looking at markets. Anyone who takes short-term markets moves as a sign of wisdom or intelligence doesn't know much about markets. I think I read that the other president whose term started with the strongest Dow Jones Industrial Average move was Herbert Hoover. So I think the way to think about markets is the way that Warren Buffett described it. In the short run, it's a popularity contest. In the long run, it's an adding machine. So in the short run, markets fluctuate, and that's just a fact of life. I wouldn't take them too seriously. I think that what we're seeing in terms of the economy is something different, because when we look at the economy, we're in a global economy with completely different characteristics than the way Mr. Trump describes it. And so when we think about the United States succeeding and triumphing in the global economy, it's not just about how we do, it's also about how we split it up. Because the fact of the matter is, what we've seen for 40 years is that working people have gotten a terrible deal in our society. And everyone acts as if somehow that's the market forces, it's out of our control, and that's absolutely false. The fact of the matter is, every market runs on rules, employment markets run on rules, and we have given working people the shaft for about 40 years. So when you ask about the economy, there is the broad-based question about how the country does, but there is a much different question, which is who is getting the benefit of growth. And the fact of the matter is, our country has done pretty well, but for about 70% of the people, they have gotten the shaft. And that's exactly what this conversation was about in 2016, was how is it possible that the top 1% is doing so well and everybody else is languishing.
But that wasn't changed by Obama.
The fact of the matter was we have had income inequality for 40 years, and what we're seeing is an attack on working people in our society. So that when we think about what Trump is doing, the idea that we're going to cut corporate tax rates, that means that there's more money to the bottom line of corporations. So that means that the people who own the stock in corporations are going to do better. And in return, we're going to cut health care. We're going to cut food stamps. We're going to cut education funds, all the basic services for middle-class people. That is just more evidence that the fact of the matter is this society has not paid attention to the middle class and working people for way too long, and it is an absolute travesty, and it's something we should be addressing directly instead of with, sort of sayings and a few things here and there.
We'll see if they do. Tom Steyer, thank you so much for giving so much of your time today. It's
Thank you
wonderful
for having
to have
me.
you.